My father always laughed before he insulted me. That was the part people didn't notice. They heard the joke, the tone, the casual delivery, and assumed it was harmless, that he was just teasing, that I was too sensitive. But I learned early on that the laugh was never kindness. It was a shield, a way to say something cruel and step back before anyone could question it. He laughed the night he called me uneducated and worthless. We were sitting in his living room, the same room where I'd spent most of my childhood trying to earn his approval without realizing that the rules were rigged. The television was on, some news channel murmuring in the background. My stepmother sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, half listening. My younger half-brother was at the dining table, earbuds in, entirely uninterested. I was there because my father had asked me to come. That alone should have warned me. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, one leg stretched out like he owned not just the room but everyone in it. He looked at me the way he always did, like I was a problem he'd never quite solved. "So," he said, smirking, "how's life treating you these days?" I smiled politely, the old reflex. "It's going well." He raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "Yes," I said. "I've been busy." "With what?" he asked. I hesitated for half a second. "Work." There it was, the laugh. Short, sharp, dismissive. "Work," he repeated. "Doing what exactly?" I told him. I kept it simple, clear. I didn't embellish. I'd learned long ago that no amount of explanation ever changed his conclusion. He shook his head, still smiling. "You know, when I was your age, I already had a real career." I nodded. "I know." "And a degree," he added, "a proper one, not whatever path you chose." The room felt smaller. "I didn't finish college," I said evenly. "That doesn't mean—" "Oh, come on," he interrupted, waving his hand. "Let's call it what it is. You dropped out. You didn't have the discipline." My stepmother glanced up briefly, then looked back at her phone. I swallowed. "I was 20, I said, "and you weren't exactly helping." His smile faded for a fraction of a second. Then it returned, harder. "There it is. Blame. Typical." I felt heat creep up my neck. "I'm not blaming you, I'm stating facts. The fact," he said slowly, leaning forward, "is that you never amounted to much. No education, no real credentials. You just drift." The word drift landed like a slap. "I have a job," I said. He snorted. "A job isn't a career." I looked around the room. No one was stepping in. No one ever did. "You know," he continued, voice almost cheerful, "sometimes I wonder where I went wrong. I raised you better than this." That was when he said it. "Honestly," he added, shaking his head, "uneducated and worthless. That's how you come across." The words hung in the air. Worthless. I didn't respond right away. My body went very still, like it was bracing for impact. I felt that familiar urge to disappear, to shrink, to nod and accept the label before it cut deeper. That was the old version of me. Instead, I smiled. Not the practiced, polite smile I'd perfected over years of surviving him. This one was slower, calmer, almost amused. He noticed. "What?" he said, frowning. "Nothing," I replied softly. He leaned back again. "I'm just being honest. Someone has to tell you the truth." I looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had spent my entire life defining me by what I wasn't, by the boxes I didn't check, by the version of success he'd decided mattered. "I hear you," I said. He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Maybe it'll motivate you." I stood up. That surprised him. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home," I said. "You just got here." "I know." He scoffed. "Running away again?" I paused, turned back to him. "No," I said calmly. "I'm choosing not to stay where I'm disrespected." He blinked, caught off guard. "You're too sensitive." I smiled again. "You always say that." I grabbed my bag and walked out before he could respond. My heart was pounding by the time I reached my car, but not from fear, from something else. Recognition. The drive home was quiet. No music, no podcasts, just the hum of the road and the echo of his words looping in my head. Uneducated. Worthless. I'd heard variations of it my entire life. When I was 10 and brought home a report card with 1B on it, he'd laughed and said, "Guess you didn't inherit my brain." When I was 16 and told him I wanted to study art, he'd scoffed, "That's not a real future." When I was 19 and dropped out of college because I couldn't afford tuition and rent at the same time, he'd told anyone who would listen that I'd given up. Every milestone I reached without his approval somehow became proof that he was right about me. But sitting alone in my car, I realized something I'd never fully allowed myself to see. He didn't actually know me. Not my life, not my work, not what I'd built in the quiet spaces where his voice didn't reach. He knew a story about me, one he'd been telling for years, and I'd been letting him. When I got home, my apartment felt like a refuge, small, modest, mine. I dropped my bag by the door and leaned against it, eyes closed, breathing slowly until the tension eased. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "You shouldn't take things so personally. I'm just trying to help." I stared at the message. Then I opened my laptop. Not to vent, not to distract myself, to look at something concrete. My calendar, my inbox, my work. I scrolled through emails from clients, messages thanking me, confirming payments, asking for my availability weeks in advance. I opened a folder of projects I'd completed over the past year, things I'd built from nothing with no degree, no safety net, no support from him. I wasn't drifting. I was navigating. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was upset, though part of me was, but because my mind wouldn't slow down. Memories surfaced, one after another, lining up like they'd been waiting their turn. The time he'd introduced me at a family gathering as the creative one, his tone making it clear what he really meant. The way he praised my half-brother's grades loudly while barely acknowledging my work. The offhand comments, the jokes, the laughs, all the ways he'd taught me to see myself through his disappointment. By morning, I was exhausted, but clear. I knew something had to change. Not him, me. A few days later, he called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Yes?" "Still sulking?" he asked. "No," I said, "just busy." "With what?" he repeated, like a script he couldn't abandon. "Living my life," I replied. He chuckled. "You were always dramatic." I didn't respond. "You know," he continued, "if you'd just admit you messed up, maybe I could help you get back on track." I took a breath. "I didn't mess up." He scoffed. "You dropped out." "I survived," I corrected. "There's a difference." Silence. "You think you know better than me?" he asked finally. "I think you don't know me at all," I said. He laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "That's rich." "I'm serious," I continued. "You call me uneducated and worthless, but you have no idea what I do, what I've built." "Because it's not worth knowing," he snapped. I felt it then, the line, clear, bright. "Then you don't get to define me," I said calmly. He was quiet. "You've never asked, not once. You just assumed." "Well," he said coldly, "prove me wrong." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I will," I said, "just not for you." I hung up before he could reply. Over the next week, I made a decision I'd been circling for years. I stopped chasing his approval. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a speech. I just withdrew. I stopped updating him, stopped explaining myself, stopped bracing for his reactions. And in that space, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived that changed everything. An invitation, an opportunity I hadn't even known was possible a year ago. Something big, something real, something that would require me to step fully into who I actually was, not who he'd decided I'd be. I stared at the screen, heart racing. For the first time, I didn't think about what my father would say. I thought about what I wanted. And that was the moment I realized. The day I finally told my father who I really was wouldn't be fueled by anger. It would be fueled by truth. And when that day came, he wouldn't be laughing. Not anymore. I didn't tell my father about the opportunity. Not because I was hiding it, at least not in the way he would accuse me of, but because I wanted something for myself for once. Something untouched by his commentary, his skepticism, his need to reduce everything I did into a lesson about what I lacked. The email sat in my inbox like a quiet promise. I reread it every morning before work. Not obsessively, just enough to remind myself it was real. That someone, somewhere, had looked at my work, my actual work, not my resume gaps, not my unfinished degree, and decided I was worth their time. That alone felt unfamiliar. The opportunity wasn't glamorous on the surface. It wasn't a headline or a viral moment. It was responsibility, visibility, a chance to step into a role that required trust. The kind of trust my father had never given me. I accepted. The moment I clicked yes, my hands trembled. I sat back in my chair and laughed softly, alone in my apartment. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time in my life, my next step didn't require his approval, his validation, or his blessing. It was mine. The weeks that followed were intense. Long hours, steep learning curves, decisions that mattered. I threw myself into it fully, not to prove anything, but because I cared, because I was good at it, because every day confirmed something I'd always suspected but had never been allowed to say out loud. I was capable. My father, of course, noticed the change before I mentioned it. "You sound busy," he said during one of our rare phone calls. "I am." "Doing what?" There it was again, the interrogation disguised as curiosity. "Working," I replied. He scoffed. "Still?" "Yes," I said evenly. "Still." "You know," he continued, "if you spend half as much energy fixing your mistakes as you do pretending everything's fine, you might actually get somewhere." I closed my eyes. "I'm already somewhere," I said. He laughed. "That's what worries me." Something in me stilled. "Why?" I asked. "Because false confidence is dangerous. It leads people to overestimate themselves." I let the silence stretch. "Do you know what's actually dangerous?" I said calmly. He didn't answer. Convincing someone they're nothing for so long that they forget they ever were something. His voice hardened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being honest." He exhaled sharply. "You always twist things to make me the villain." I smiled faintly. "You don't need my help with that." The call ended shortly after, abruptly, unsatisfyingly, but for once, it didn't derail me. Because something else was happening alongside these conversations, something quieter, but far more powerful. People were listening to me. At work, in meetings, in emails, my input mattered.
My decisions had impact. When I spoke, people didn't interrupt. They didn't smirk. They didn't laugh before dismissing what I said. They trusted me. That trust began to reshape the way I saw myself.
I noticed it in small ways first. The way I stopped second-guessing every email before sending it. The way I spoke more clearly, more directly. The way I didn't shrink when someone challenged me. I engaged. One afternoon, a colleague pulled me aside after a presentation. "You know," she said, smiling, "you're really good at this. You explain things in a way that actually makes sense." I blinked. "Thank you." "You should give yourself more credit," she added. I laughed softly. "I'm working on it." She had no idea how literal that was. A few days later, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. That alone told me he'd sensed a shift. I opened the door to find him standing there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You didn't tell me you moved up in the world?" he said. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Your aunt mentioned something, said you're doing well." The air quotes were implied. "I'm doing my job," I said. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, eyes scanning the space like he was looking for evidence that contradicted his beliefs. "This doesn't look like much," he commented. "It's enough," I replied. He turned to me. "So what is it you do now, exactly?" I studied him for a moment, not with anger, with curiosity. This was the question he'd asked my entire life, but never really wanted answered. I told him anyway. I explained my role, my responsibilities, the scope of what I managed. I didn't exaggerate, I didn't downplay, I just stated facts. As I spoke, his expression shifted, not to pride, not to admiration, but to discomfort. "You got all that without a degree?" he asked finally. "Yes." He shook his head slowly. "That's unusual." "Is that a problem?" I asked. He hesitated. "It just doesn't make sense." I smiled. "It doesn't fit the story you tell about me." His jaw tightened. "You think one decent job changes everything?" "No," I said. "I think it reveals what was always there." He laughed again, but this time it was brittle. "You really think you're something special now?" "I think I always was. You just didn't want to see it." That did it. He stood abruptly. "Don't get ahead of yourself. People like you peak early." I didn't flinch. "And people like you underestimate others because it makes them feel safer." His eyes narrowed. "You're starting to sound arrogant." "No," I said. "I'm starting to sound like someone who knows her worth." He stared at me, searching for the version of me that used to fold under his gaze. She wasn't there anymore. "You've changed," he said flatly. "Yes, I had to." He left soon after, no goodbye, no apology. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, heart racing, not with fear, but with adrenaline. That conversation replayed in my mind for days, not because of what he said, but because of what I didn't do. I didn't defend myself. I didn't over-explain. I didn't apologize for existing. That was new. A week later, the opportunity expanded. More responsibility, more visibility, a formal title, a raise that made me laugh out loud when I saw the number. I accepted again. This time, when my phone rang and his name appeared on the screen, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I answered. "I heard you got promoted," he said. His tone was clipped. "Yes." "Well," he said, "I suppose even broken clocks are right twice a day." I closed my eyes. "Do you actually want to say congratulations?" There was a pause. "That depends," he replied. "Are you done proving a point?" I smiled. "I'm not proving anything. I'm building something." He scoffed. "Without an education, it won't last." "Funny," I replied, "because I've been educating myself my entire life." "Books don't replace degrees," he snapped. "Neither does arrogance replace wisdom," I said quietly. Silence. "You think you're better than me now," he accused. "No," I said. "I think I'm finally no longer beneath you." That silence stretched longer.
When he spoke again, his voice was low. Careful. With what? I asked. With burning bridges. I considered that. Some bridges, I said, are only ever used to cross back into places that hurt you. He hung up. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights dim, city noise humming outside the window. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who tried so hard to impress him, the teenager who internalized his disappointment as truth, the young woman who thought survival meant silence. I wished I could tell her something, not that it would all work out, not that he would change, but that she would, that one day she'd look him in the eye and see not a judge, but a man limited by his own narrow definitions of worth. And when the moment finally came, the moment he demanded proof, demanded explanation, demanded to know who she really was, she wouldn't raise her voice, she wouldn't beg, she would simply tell the truth, and it would shake him more than anger ever could. Because the day I finally told my father who I really was getting closer, and this time I wouldn't smile to survive, I would speak to be heard. The day my father demanded to meet me again, I already knew why. He didn't ask how I was, he didn't pretend it was casual. His message was short, clipped, and unmistakably him. We need to talk, in person. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. A year ago, that sentence would have filled me with dread. My chest would have tightened, my mind would have raced through everything I'd done wrong, everything I might need to defend. I would have agreed immediately, desperate to control the narrative. This time, I didn't rush. About what? I typed. The reply came quickly.
About you. I smiled faintly. Okay, I wrote. Tomorrow afternoon. Public place. A pause. Fine. We met at a cafe halfway between our apartments. Neutral territory. Windows everywhere. Noise. Witnesses. I chose it deliberately, not because I was afraid of him, but because I wanted to stay grounded, present, uncornered. He was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly at a corner table, arms folded, jaw tight. He didn't stand when he saw me, didn't smile, just watched me approach like he was evaluating a risk. "You're late," he said. "I'm on time," I replied, sitting down. "You're early." His mouth tightened. He didn't like being corrected. We ordered. He didn't ask what I wanted. I ordered for myself. Another small shift. For a moment, we sat in silence, the clatter of cups and low conversations filling the space between us. "You've been talking," he said finally. I raised an eyebrow. About me," he replied. "About how I treated you." I took a sip of water. "Have I?" He leaned forward. "People are getting the wrong impression." "Whose impression?" I asked. "My family's. Your aunt, your cousin. They think I was harsh." I held his gaze. "Were you?" His nostrils flared. "I pushed you. That's what parents do." "Pushing isn't the same as belittling," I said calmly. He scoffed. "You're rewriting the past." "No," I replied. "I'm finally allowed to talk about it." His eyes narrowed. "You always twist things when you feel insecure." I didn't react. That alone unsettled him. "I'm not insecure," I said. "I'm honest." He laughed, sharp and dismissive. "You think this little success of yours gives you the right to judge me?" "No," I said. "It gives me the safety to speak." He paused, thrown off. "What do you want?" he demanded. The question surprised me. "I didn't ask you here," I said. "You asked me." He clenched his jaw. "I want you to stop painting me like some villain." I considered that. "Then stop giving people reasons to see you that way."
His hand slammed lightly against the table. Cups rattled. "There it is, that arrogance. You really think you're above me now?" I shook my head. "You keep saying that because you don't know how to exist without hierarchy." He stared at me. "I'm not above you, and I'm not beneath you. I'm just not under your thumb anymore." His face flushed. "You wouldn't be anywhere without me." I smiled sadly. "You weren't there when I worked 2 jobs to pay rent. You weren't there when I taught myself skills no one paid me for yet. You weren't there when I failed and tried again." "That's not true," he snapped. "I provided. I criticized. There's a difference." The cafe noise seemed to fade around us. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes cold. "So what is this? Some kind of confrontation?" "No," I replied. "It's clarity." "Then clarify," he said. "Tell me who you think you are."
The words hung there. This was it, the moment I'd been circling for years, the question he'd asked in 100 indirect ways, the challenge beneath every insult. "Who do you think you are?" I took a slow breath. "I'm someone who learned early that love in this family came with conditions," I said. "I'm someone who was told my value depended on credentials I couldn't afford. I'm someone who survived without the approval I was supposed to need." He scoffed, but I continued. "I'm someone who built a career without a degree because I didn't have the luxury of waiting for permission. I'm someone who kept going even when the person who should have believed in me most didn't." His jaw tightened. "And I'm someone," I said steadily, "who is done letting you define me as uneducated or worthless." His laugh came out harsh. "You're not special." "I never said I was," I replied. "I said I'm capable." "Prove it," he said again, like a reflex. I met his eyes. "I already have." Silence stretched between us. "You think money makes you educated now?" he asked. "No," I said. "Experience did. Curiosity did. Failure did." He shook his head. "You're deluding yourself." "Maybe," I replied, "but this delusion pays my bills, earns respect, and lets me sleep at night." He leaned forward again. "You're ungrateful." "For what?" I asked quietly. "For everything I gave you," he said. I nodded. "I'm grateful for what you gave. I'm no longer willing to absorb what you took." He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You want an apology," he said flatly. "No," I replied. "I want accountability." He laughed. "From me?" "Yes." "For what?" he demanded. "For calling me worthless, for mocking my intelligence, for making love conditional on success." His eyes hardened. "You're exaggerating." I leaned back. "This is why we're here." The barista called out a name. A spoon clinked. Life went on around us. "I'm not asking you to change overnight," I said. "I'm telling you what I won't accept anymore." "And if I don't agree?" he asked. "Then our relationship stays distant, not dramatic, not hostile, just limited." His lips pressed into a thin line. "You'd cut me off." "I'd protect myself," I corrected. He studied me, searching for weakness. "You always needed me," he said softly, almost kindly. I felt a flicker of sadness. I needed a father, not a judge. Something in his expression shifted, just slightly, a crack. But it closed just as fast. "You think this makes you strong, walking away." "I think it makes me honest," I replied. "Strength came later." He stood abruptly. "You didn't raise me to be like this." I stood too. "You didn't raise me to survive without you, but I did." We stood there, facing each other. No shouting, no scene, just 2 truths colliding. "This conversation isn't over," he said. "It is for today," I replied. I left first. Outside, the air felt sharper, colder, real. I walked for a long time before getting into my car. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I felt emptied, like I'd set something down I'd been carrying far too long. That night, he sent a message. "You've changed. I don't recognize you." I stared at it. Then I replied, "I recognize myself." I set the phone down. In the days that followed, I replayed the conversation, not with regret, but with curiosity, noting the moments I'd stayed calm, the times I'd told the truth without flinching. I realized something important. Telling him who I really was hadn't been about shocking him. It had been about no longer hiding. And whether he accepted it or not, the truth was out there now, spoken, solid, undeniable. But I also knew this wasn't the end. My father wasn't done testing the boundaries I'd set. He never had been. And the final reckoning, the moment where he would truly understand what he'd lost the right to call me, was still coming. I could feel it. Because the most dangerous thing to someone who thrives on control isn't defiance, it's certainty. And I had never been more certain of who I was. Not anymore. After the cafe, my father went quiet. Not the dramatic kind of silence meant to punish, not the stormy kind that demanded attention. This was different, calculated, watchful, the kind of quiet that meant he was reassessing. I knew that silence well. It was the same silence he used when I was a teenager and talked back for the first time. The same one he used when I moved out against his wishes. The pause before the next tactic. For weeks, there were no calls, no messages, no indirect comments relayed through family members. At first, I braced myself. Then, slowly, I realized something else. The quiet wasn't peace. It was preparation. In the meantime, my life continued to expand in ways that felt almost surreal. Work grew more demanding, but in the good way. I was trusted with decisions that affected entire teams. People asked for my opinion and waited for the answer. When I made mistakes, no one mocked me. We fixed them. We moved on. One afternoon, my manager stopped me after a meeting. "You have leadership instincts," she said. "Have you ever thought about stepping into a senior role?" I blinked. "I don't have a degree." She smiled. "Neither does one of our best directors. You have something more useful: judgment." I walked back to my desk feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. Judgment. For most of my life, judgment had been something done to me. Now it was something I was trusted with. That night, I treated myself to dinner out. Nothing fancy, just a quiet restaurant, a table by the window, my phone face down. I wanted to be alone with the feeling, not rush past it, not diluted by explaining it to anyone else. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. My father's name. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, because I wasn't ready to step back into his gravity. He left a voicemail. I listened to it when I got home. "You embarrassed me," he said. "No greeting, no preamble. Your aunt thinks I was cruel. Your cousin thinks I failed you. Do you have any idea what that does to a man's reputation?" I let the message end. Then there was another. "You could have handled this privately." A third. "I was hard on you because I expected more." A fourth. "You're twisting things to make yourself the victim." I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, heart steady. There it was. Not concern, not reflection, reputation. That night, I didn't respond. The next morning, my stepmother called. "I think your father's really hurt," she said cautiously. "Hurt by what?" I asked. "He feels attacked," she replied, "like you're turning everyone against him." "I told the truth," I said. "If that changes how people see him, that's not something I control." She sighed. "You know how he is." "Yes," I said. "That's the problem. You only get one father," she added gently. I closed my eyes. "And I only get one nervous system." She didn't reply. Family gatherings became complicated.
At my cousin's birthday, my father avoided me entirely. He spoke loudly to everyone else, laughed too hard, made a point of being seen. When someone mentioned my work, he changed the subject. When I spoke, conversations paused slightly, just enough for me to notice. They were watching, not judging, measuring, seeing whether I'd shrink back into the role they remembered. I didn't. I was calm, polite, unremarkable in the best way. I didn't bring up the cafe conversation. I didn't defend myself. I existed as I was. That seemed to unsettle him more than any confrontation ever had. Near the end of the evening, he cornered me near the kitchen. "You enjoying the attention?" he muttered. "What attention?" I asked. He scoffed. "Everyone suddenly thinks you're some kind of success story." I smiled. "I didn't write the story, I just lived it." He leaned closer. "Careful, people love building you up just to tear you down." I met his eyes. That used to scare me. "And now?" he challenged. "Now," I said, "I know who I am, even if they do." Something dark flickered across his face. A few days later, the real move came. He invited me to dinner, just the two of us. I almost declined, but something told me this wasn't avoidable anymore. His house hadn't changed. Same furniture, same framed certificates on the wall, same quiet assertion of accomplishment.
We sat across from each other at the dining table, like strangers forced into civility. "I didn't call you here to fight," he said. "Good," I replied. "Neither did I." He took a sip of wine. "I've been thinking." I waited. "You embarrassed me," he repeated, but softer this time. "But you also surprised me." "How so?" I asked. "I didn't think you had it in you," he admitted. I nodded slowly. "You've said that my whole life." "Yes," he replied. "And maybe that was a mistake." That caught my attention. "Maybe," he continued, "I pushed too hard." Maybe. The word sat between us like a placeholder apology. "I need to understand something," he said. "Why now?" "Why now what?" "Why now are you suddenly so confident?" I thought about that, about the years of quiet work, of surviving, of learning to trust myself when no one else did. "I didn't suddenly become confident," I said. "I stopped asking for permission." He frowned. "From me?" "From everyone," I replied, "but especially you." He leaned back, studying me. "You know, when you didn't finish college, I was ashamed." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't interrupt. "You weren't ashamed of my struggle," he continued. "You were ashamed of how it looked." He didn't deny it. "I worked my entire life to be respected. I didn't want people thinking my child was less." I met his gaze. "I was never less." "I know that now," he said quietly. That was the closest he'd ever come to an apology. "And when you called me uneducated and worthless," I added, "that wasn't motivation. That was harm." He looked down at his glass. He didn't know another way. "That doesn't make it okay," I said, "but I understand it." He exhaled. "You were always so stubborn." I smiled faintly. "So were you." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't hostile. "I don't know how to talk to you now," he admitted. "That's honest," I said. "We can start there." He nodded once. But honesty didn't erase habits overnight. A week later, he made a comment at a family dinner about book smarts versus real intelligence. He glanced at me when he said it. I didn't react. Later, I pulled him aside. "If that was about me," I said, "don't do it again." He bristled. "I wasn't insulting you." "I was undermining you. There's a difference." He frowned. "You're very sensitive." I smiled. "And you're very predictable." He didn't like that. But he didn't repeat the comment either. That was when I realized this wasn't about winning. It was about consistency. Every time he tested the boundary, I held it, calmly, without drama, without retreat, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, his power over me weakened. One evening, I got an email confirming something I'd worked toward for months, a public recognition, an industry mention, my name attached to something undeniable. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just success, it was visibility. I knew instantly that this was the moment he would hear who I really was, not from me, but from the world he respected so much. And for the first time, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Because when my father finally confronted the truth, when he could no longer reduce me to a joke or a disappointment, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. The evidence would speak, and so would I. Just once more, on my terms. The recognition went live on a Thursday morning. I hadn't planned to tell anyone right away, not because I was afraid of jinxing it, not because I wanted secrecy, but because I wanted to experience it privately first. I wanted to sit with the truth of it before it became a conversation, before it turned into opinions, before it got filtered through other people's reactions. My name sat there on the screen, not hidden, not implied, not minimized, clear, public, attached to work I had built from nothing. I stared at it for a long time, my coffee going cold beside me, my chest rising and falling like I'd just finished a long run. I didn't cry, I didn't laugh, I just breathed. This wasn't vindication, it was confirmation. By noon, the messages started coming in. Colleagues, old clients, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Congratulations, pride, respect. Words that once would have made me uncomfortable because I didn't believe I deserved them. Now I accepted them quietly. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. My father. I watched it ring. Once, twice, then I answered. Yes? You didn't tell me, he said immediately. I leaned back in my chair. Tell you what? That article, that recognition, everyone's talking about it. I didn't think it required an announcement, I replied. He exhaled sharply. Do you have any idea how that made me feel, finding out from someone else? I closed my eyes briefly, not from frustration, from clarity. Welcome to my childhood, I said calmly.
Silence. I mean, he continued, recovering, this kind of thing. This is serious. This is respectable. I smiled faintly. It always was. You could have told me, he said. I'm your father. You're someone who called me uneducated and worthless, I replied. Those two things can't coexist without change. His voice dropped. I didn't mean it the way you took it. I know how you meant it, I said. That doesn't change how it landed. Another pause. You proved me wrong, he said finally. No, I corrected. I proved myself right. He didn't like that answer, but he didn't argue. I've been getting calls, he added. People asking about you, saying you're impressive. I imagined him standing a little straighter as he said it. Imagined the pride creeping in now that my success reflected well on him. That must be strange, I said gently. Yes, he admitted. It is. There was something different in his voice now. Not humility, he wasn't there yet, but uncertainty, a crack in the certainty he'd built his identity on. I want to understand something, he said. Why didn't you ever tell me how hard it was for you? I felt my throat tighten, but my voice stayed steady. I did, I said. You just didn't hear it. He was quiet for a long time. I thought pressure made people stronger, he said eventually. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just teaches them to hide. Another silence. I never thought you'd get this far without doing things the right way, he said. There is no single right way, I replied. There's only the way that keeps you alive long enough to grow. He sighed.
You sound like someone who knows what she's talking about. I smiled. I do. That evening, he asked if we could meet. Not demanded, not summoned. Asked. I agreed. We met at his house again, but this time the energy was different. The walls still displayed his achievements, but they didn't intimidate me anymore. They were just history. He poured wine. His hands shook slightly. I read the article, all of it. And? I asked. You're articulate, he said, like it surprised him. I laughed softly. That tends to happen when people are allowed to speak. He winced. I didn't know, he said again. I know. I thought, he continued, choosing his words carefully, that if I pushed you hard enough, you'd either rise or fail quickly. And if you failed? I asked. He hesitated. Then I'd know. Know what? Whether you were worth investing in, he admitted. The honesty stung, but it didn't devastate me. I was always worth investing in. You just didn't like the return being on my terms. He looked down at his glass. You're right.
That was new. I don't expect you to rewrite who you are, I continued. I just won't let you rewrite who I am anymore. He nodded slowly. I see that now. Good, I said, because this is who I am. I told him then, not with a resume, not with numbers, with truth. I told him about the nights I worked after my body begged me to stop, the moments I doubted myself and kept going anyway, the skills I taught myself because no one else would, the pride I learned to feel without permission. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften the truth either. When I finished, he sat there, unmoving. I didn't know my words stayed with you like that, he said quietly. They shaped me, I replied. I just decided they wouldn't define me. He swallowed. I'm sorry. The word landed between us. Not dramatic, not performative, just present. I don't need you to worship me, I said. I just need you to stop tearing me down. He nodded. I can do that. I need consistency, I added, not moments. I understand, he said. And for the first time, I believed he might. Our relationship didn't transform overnight. There were still moments where his old instincts surfaced, small comments, reflexive comparisons. But now, when they did, I addressed them immediately. And he listened, not always gracefully, but sincerely. Months later, at a family gathering, someone asked him about me. He didn't joke. He didn't minimize. He said, she built something remarkable on her own. I caught his eye across the room. He nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, driving home, I thought about the girl I'd been when he first laughed at me. The woman who once believed intelligence had to be stamped, certified, approved. I wished I could sit beside her and tell her this. One day, the person who made you feel small will run out of language to describe you. One day, you'll stop needing to be believed because your life will speak for you. One day, you'll realize that being underestimated was never a flaw, it was freedom. My father once mocked me as uneducated and worthless, and then I told him who I really was. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with a life he could no longer deny. And that was the most powerful education of all.